Chapter 321, Episode 61, Gigantomachia 1. The atmosphere was scary. Hades was silent for a long time and it was unknown what he was thinking. I tried to hide my nerves. Kim Dokja thought, this is the first hump. The surrounding air became increasingly heavy as Hades opened his mouth. The real Gigantomachia, do you know the weight of those words? I know. The Gigantomachia hosted by the great nebula Olympus. It was the festival of the star stream where 5 or 6 subgiants trapped in Tartarus were released and hunted in order to enjoy an old victory. Hades spoke, the war ended long ago. The gods won both Titanomachy and Gigantomachia. Hades was right. The real war was already over thousands of years ago. It is already a predetermined history. What is the point of recalling it? Why are you trying to recreate Gigantomachia? That is what I want to ask you. Why do the constellations of Olympus continue to make fake Gigantomachia? Why do you call that scenario Gigantomachia, summoning and killing the giants and reenacting the old battles? My knees involuntarily quivered in front of Hades' furious status. The distant Persephone was upset and alternated looking between me and Hades. The moment Persephone opened her mouth, I shook my head at her. I shouldn't receive help here. With my own strength, I had to endure it without kneeling. The giant story, Demon World Spring, is protecting the best narrator. It wasn't comparable to Hades' underworld, but we also had a story. The story we had accumulated with our power. I used the power of this story to oppose Hades. In fact, it is because of fear. The big nebulae were filled with fearsome and powerful beings. They were also the most cowardly in the star stream. You are afraid that the giants will rise again. Thus, you will take out the soul of the dead and trample on them, giving a reminder of the ugly triumph. There were many ways to make the real disappear. One way was to create countless fakes, worthless and common fakes. The desperate battle became a play that was replicated countless times, a story that was a laughingstock to everyone. Gigantomachia lost its authenticity long ago. It became a scenario that no constellation was truly afraid of. I looked up at Hades and asked, Father of the rich knight, how long will you let Tartarus be Olympus' toy? He didn't belong to Olympus, but was considered to be one of Olympus' 3 great masters. I suddenly recalled his setting in Ways of Survival. Hades supplied a number of giants to Gigantomachia, but never participated in the scenario. The king of the underworld had watched the suffering of the giants trapped in his prison for a long time. Hades knew the sorrows of the prisoners and understood their pain. He was like a prison guard educated by the prisoners. The last time I visited, I saw a giant soldier in the underground of Tartarus. Haven't you been preparing for this time? That is speculation. To the 12 gods of Olympus, Hades would have explained the existence of the giant soldier in a different way. It was in case the giants once again made a war. However, I knew Hades' real idea. I know that you hate the 12 gods. Despite being one of the 3 heads, to them you are just a guard taking care of troublemakers. The oldest guard in the world might be no different from prisoners. Hades quietly looked down at me. Gigantomachia is a terrible war. I know. Once the real Gigantomachia starts, it isn't only the giants who become the toy of the scenario. Everyone there will become part of the giant story. Hades spoke with distant eyes that seemed to see destruction. The Docubus will run wild, and there will be an upheaval in the star stream. The dynamics of the nebulae that have lasted for a long time will collapse. I'm also aware of that. What do you want to gain from displaying that terrible pain to the world? It wasn't me who answered. The story king of a kingless world has started the story. The story person who opposes the miracle has started the story. The story demon king of salvation has started the story. The giant story Demon World Spring has started the story. All the stories I accumulated answered for me. There was also a story I saw for the first time. The story Life and Death Colleagues has started the story. All the stories flowed towards the proper ending. A little human has very amazing dreams. The smaller you are, the bigger the dream. You know about stage transformation. I nodded. I already knew what Hades would say. The 12 gods aren't the problem. Once the war begins, the ancient heroes who led Gigantomachia to victory will reappear. The moment they encounter the giants, stage transformation will begin and the tragedy of history will be repeated. There are also heroes on this side. The stage will be smashed. Yu Jonghyuk glanced at me and frowned. Hades opened his mouth again. There still remains one decisive problem. The main characters of the stage. I looked down at the ground. In the underground of this old prison, the protagonists of the old Gigantomachia will be waiting for me. Do you think they want Gigantomachia? The beginning is Gigantomachia, but the end will be different. I smiled and answered, if they don't want it, I have to make them want it. After Kim Dokja disappeared, Han Soo-young was busy appeasing the party members. Shit, am I some type of babysitter? Lee Gil-young and Shin Yu-sung were sitting blankly in their seats, while Lee Hyun-sung's huge body was crouched down in the middle of the children as he muttered something. Han Soo-young sighed and pressed the party members, "Hey, everyone, wake up." This time, he went with Yu Jonghyuk. Of course, it didn't work. Dokja Hyung again. I should have locked him up at that time. Lee Ji-hai and Lee Seolwa tried to soothe the children, while Han Soo-young was thinking about the problems she faced now. Kim Dokja and Yu Jonghyuk were taken away, so she had to take care of the preparations for the rest of the week. Now is the real Han Soo-young's corporation. A message has arrived via the unidentified wall. It was from Jang Hae-young. Han Soo-young, are you well? Han Soo-young became wide awake as contact was finally made. It was time for the transcendent party to return. Where are you now? I am about to return to Earth. Didn't you come sooner? Since there was no other place to confide in, Han Soo-young started to vent her accumulated anger through the unidentified wall. The things that happened in the meantime, what happened to the party members. Han Soo-young, who usually didn't talk much, strangely had a lot of words when using the wall. It was the feeling of receiving a consultation. Summary: Kim Dokja came back and is gone again. The window widened and the message window of the wall became a screen. On the screen, Jang Hae-young and the Breaking the Sky Master could be seen. Why are you telling me now? When did Kim Dokja come back? That isn't important right now. The next moment, there was a strong noise from the screen and the subject of the conversation changed. At first, she thought there was a bug on the screen and wiped it. However, the bug looked good and started talking. Has my disciple returned? A small man sat on the head of the Barking, Breaking the Sky Master, and shouted in a stern voice. Show him right now. The guy who left and didn't find his teacher when coming back must be severely punished. The next moment, someone pulled the bug from the screen. Then a small mountain appeared on the screen. No, looking closely, it wasn't a mountain. It was someone's nose. Where did that guy go? It was the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint. Han Soo-young summarized what happened as much as possible. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint listened to the story and thought about something for a moment. If he was taken from Olympus, legal zone, he must be trapped in Tartaros. Then there is no need to worry. Han Soo-young was a bit surprised by the unconcerned voice. Before she could say something, the giant nose looked somewhere and muttered with a nostalgic voice. I don't know if they're doing well. Yu Jonghyuk and I were thrown to the first floor of Tartarus. Persephone's face was playful as she patted my head and told me, Demon King of Salvation, it won't be easy to convince the giants. Somehow you look happy. It has been a long time since this type of incident happened in Olympus. I can secretly help along with my husband, but that wouldn't be fun, would it? No, it would be good if you help. I pray for the blessing of the story, Demon King of Salvation. I was expecting her to help me. The underworld shouldn't officially participate in this scenario. If the underworld participated in Gigantomachia, the scale and probability of this war would be out of control. Therefore, this war should be in the form of a rebellion that proceeded under the tacit approval of the underworld. We crossed the first floor of Tartarus. The prisoners working on the first floor were still pouring their energy into the giant soldier. Some of them glanced at us, but none of them were very interested. It seemed they were new prisoners. Do you think you can convince the giants? I don't know, I'm going to see now. In the dungeons of Tartarus, those beyond imagination were trapped. It wasn't just the giants, but also the constellations and transcendents who had committed all types of evil actions against Olympus. They were monsters that Yu Jonghyuk and I could never deal with at the moment. It will be tough. There is only a week. Somehow it will work out. By the way, don't you have someone to meet here? Yu Jonghyuk stared at me as he wondered how I knew. If my memories were correct, it was the existence who taught giant body transformation to the former Yu Jonghyuk. I have someone to meet. I have to recruit him as a colleague. Colleague? Originally, I would have never made him a companion, but I changed my mind. We stopped at the same time. We had to stop. Something huge was blocking our way. By colleague, do you mean the one talking to the dog? The entrance down to the second underground floor. There was a giant dog that blocked it, the three-headed monster dog, the Cerberus. I looked up at the dog. To be precise, I looked at the giant soldier stroking the dog's head. One of the Cerberus heads was biting the giant soldier's upper arm. Hat yellowy bite. Yep. I won't be hurt by this much. The gloves were made of a tough metal. In the original novel, it was a story weapon that Hades himself used. Hey, I waved my hand and the giant soldier looked over. He trembled as if surprised and soon answered in a loud and jubilant voice. Subway grasshopper, hat, you finally came to hell, right? I smiled wryly. In order to win Gigantomachia, I needed the help of this Gundam otaku. I came to pick you up, Kim Namwoon. Chapter 322, Gigantomachia 2. Pick me up, why? I need you. Kim Namwoon stared at me like I was speaking nonsense. Speaking of which, I felt strange. I also didn't expect that I would say this. I recalled Kim Namwoon of the 1863rd round. A man with white hair who liked Lee Jihai and had a good relationship with his colleagues. The guy who was immature, didn't care for his surroundings and was deeply self-absorbed. Kim Namwoon is an evil person. There is no changing this fact. I saw Kim Namwoon's possibilities, but my prejudice against him hadn't completely reversed. I decided to use Kim Namwoon because of a conversation with the 1863rd round Han Soo-young. Won't be able to reach the 95th scenario with that mindset. Han Soo-young, Yu Jonghyuk and I were different. However, if we agreed on one thing, it was that every story pursued a moment of efficiency. The constellation, secretive plotter, is interested in your choice. The constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, is interested in incarnation, Kim Namwoon. I didn't see Uriel's message, so she must be busy teaching Yong-Hee-won. If she knew I was here, then Yong-Hee-won would be furious again. I was glad she was left in Eden. Kim Namwoon opened his mouth. I don't want to. Why should I help you? I thought he would say this. You don't have to if you don't want. Let's go, Yu Jonghyuk. I approached the Cerberus with Yu Jonghyuk. What? Where are you going? Downstairs. Puahat, are you joking? Now Yellowy is staring at you. As if to prove it, the half-dozing Cerberus raised its head and bared its teeth at us. At this time, Yu Jonghyuk used the breaking the sky swordsmanship. Previously, it would be hard to deal with the Cerberus on the first underground floor, but now it was different. You aren't gentle at all. There is no time to waste here. The Cerberus was hit by the blow and collapsed on the ground with its tongue lolling out. The prisoners were surprised by the violence, and alarms rang out everywhere. Normally, the judges would run over, but there was a tacit agreement with Hades. We would be safe for the time being. We walked past the collapsed Cerberus and down towards the second underground floor. Crazy guy. Kim Namwoon's baffled voice was heard. Yu Jonghyuk glanced at me. Are you just leaving? The giant soldier is useful. Just watch. We started down the circular staircase towards the second underground floor. The end of the circular staircase wasn't in sight. According to legend, the depths of Tartarus was so great that a dropped anvil fell for a long time. "Wait, I'll come along." Kim Nam-woon hurriedly followed after us. The body of the giant soldier was reduced to around 2 meters. Pluto was a giant soldier that could scale to fit the user's convenience. I teasingly asked him, "Why are you following us when you said you didn't want to help?" "That I'm a bit bored." The smiling mouth couldn't hide his feelings. "By the way, what are you going to do? Where are you going, huh?" "I'm going to meet the giants." "What?" Kim Nam-woon made a blank expression for a moment before shouting, "Qhat, yuhahat. Hey, subway grasshopper. I saw it at the time, but you are really crazy. Do you know what the giants are?" Of course I knew. "Once you meet those black, a hole will be punched through your black square in a moment. The prisoner filtering is activated. The contents have been filtered to ensure the correct language usage in Tartarus. Prisoner Kim Nam-woon has received 1 penalty point. This SH black square. Prisoner Kim Nam-woon has received 2 penalty points. Even if I didn't hear Kim Nam-woon's curses, I knew what the giants were. The giants, a race that dominated in the early days of Olympus. There was a dizzying roar and I involuntarily stopped. Down in the distance, the giants had already noticed our existence and were reacting. It was only some of the status, but it was enough to cause goosebumps. "Crazy, this is crazy." I ignored Kim Nam-woon's words and called out to Biyu. Then Biyu popped out from my chest. "But, is the channel well controlled?" "Bayet. Since all broadcasts of the underworld are off the record, only let the constellations who have vowed not to reveal the information into the channel." Biyu nodded and started to manipulate the channel. Some of the constellations complained, but now was the right time to do this. The less exposure there was from now on, the better it would be. Not long after, some constellations sent messages. The constellation, Prisoner of the Golden Headband, is grumbling and accepts the agreement. The constellation, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, isn't satisfied but agrees to make a pledge. The constellation, Secretive Plotter, says he already made a vow. I watched the pouring messages, and Kim Nam-woon expressed his admiration. "Wow, this channel." Kim Nam-woon died before even choosing his sponsor, so he might be surprised by the indirect messages of the constellations. All the way down the stairs, Kim Nam-woon continued to talk loudly. "By the way, the Underworld King sent you all the way down here. That Audiobook is really stern." "Shut up, open your mouth one more time and I'll cut it off." "What, do you want to fight? You want to play?" Yu Jonghyuk's gaze towards Kim Nam-woon was complicated. Yu Jonghyuk already knew Kim Nam-woon. In the last round, Kim Nam-woon was also Yu Jonghyuk's companion. "Yu Jonghyuk, don't waste power here, don't you know?" Kim Nam-woon smacked his lips when he saw Yu Jonghyuk raising his sword. He looked like a child as he breathed with excitement. A child who hadn't received attention for a long time and was alone. In response to my question about why she used Kim Nam-woon, Han Soo-young of the 1863rd round replied, "One is born a bad person from the beginning. It is all set up by the writer. The writer gave the narrative to be a bad person. I didn't like this." I also agreed with Han Soo-young's words to some extent. However, Kim Nam-woon of this world pressed the wrong button first. He instigated the worst crime by inciting the people on the subway. My heart is pounding. It is the first time I've felt like this since my father and mother abandoned me. What do you feel? It feels like a new adventure is waiting for me. Obviously, Kim Nam-woon was created. Should I blame the writer of Ways of Survival, or should I blame myself for not stopping Kim Nam-woon properly at the time? I opened my smartphone, and a new message was floating. The 4th revision update is currently in progress. I knew it would update soon. There were many things going on that it would be strange if this was quiet. As I headed downstairs, I opened Ways of Survival and read the necessary parts. It was best to read Ways of Survival when my mind became uneasy. Kim Daksha thought, The third round I am living no longer resembles any of the original rounds. Still, I might be able to find a similar part. There were many scenes about the underworld in the original ways of survival. The 47th round, the 211th round, the 397th round, there were many. However, the underworld had never appeared at this point in those rounds. We have to gather all the information available. We can't win Gigantomachia if we don't persuade the giants. There were remnants of Olympus throughout the pages of Ways of Survival. The sea was parted with a single gesture, trampling on transcendence and constellations. The 12 gods of Olympus brutally destroying planets. Once I left here, I would have to face them head-on. Many pieces of information passed through my head regarding things that could be used and things that couldn't be used. Kim Dokja. What is it? Yu Jonghyuk gazed at me quietly before speaking in a low voice. It's nothing. What was with this bastard? Suddenly speaking out of the blue. I immediately used Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint and was exposed to Yu Jonghyuk's thoughts. You don't seem confident. I felt like I had been stabbed. Maybe I showed my feelings on my face more than I thought. I deliberately opened my mouth and spoke in a loud voice. There are 2 things I need to get in the underworld. One is the giant god's armor, and the other is the giant god's oath. Neither will be easy. I guess so. The harder it is, the better the rewards. I smiled while listening to Yu Jonghyuk's words. Not long after, the entrance to the 2nd floor of the underworld appeared. As expected, the Cerberus was guarding it. It was bigger than the one on the 1st floor. The moment Yu Jonghyuk pulled out his sword, Kim Namwoon cried out. Wait, don't hit Yellowy. Get out of the way, there is no time. Kim Namwoon stroked the Cerberus and spoke. I know the location of the track elevator that the judges use. The track elevator. There were clearly such things in Tartarus, a hidden transport mechanism that only the judges could use. However, the exact location of the elevator wasn't explained in Ways of Survival. I asked doubtfully, how do you know that? I've been sneaking downstairs with it. How many floors? The 77th floor. I was startled. The 77th floor gained the gateway to the lowest floor. Follow me, it's this way. Kim Namwoon walked forward confidently, and Yu Jonghyuk and I glanced at each other. Surprisingly, this guy was helpful. As expected, I should have kept him alive. No, this time he was helpful after dying, so I did a good job of killing him. The track elevator was really fast. The 2nd underground floor, the 3rd, the 4th underground floor, the elevator descended in an instant, and along the way, we could see the terrible scenes of Tartarus. The prisoners attacked each other, and the demons in the terrible brimstone fire shouted at us. Newcomers! Hey, what are you staring at? Lower your eyes. Among the laughing prisoners, transcendence could be seen. They had committed crimes in Olympus, legal zone like me, or were held captive due to the 12 gods. Some of them would become food at the Gourmet Association's dining table. Then the elevator stopped and we got off at the 77th underground floor. The 77th floor was a prisoner-free floor, a space reminiscent of a large, hollow cavity, and its width couldn't be measured. The center of the space contained a generous-sized door. There is no Yellowy on the 78th floor. They are useless. A Cerberus couldn't stop a giant. It might be possible for a camp. Kim Namwoon hesitated before stating. I've never been there before. I put my hand into it previously, but this was what happened. I looked at the scar left on the shoulder of the giant soldier. It was almost healed now, but the damage seemed enough to tear off the arm. It wasn't perfect, but Pluto was a terrible weapon capable of exerting power equivalent to a narrative-grade constellation when there wasn't a passenger on board. Yet this weapon received such damage. I approached the door. The door was over 30 meters in height, and there was a pattern similar to a human face. Yu Jonghyuk said, there must be an offering to enter. Kim Namwoon was surprised by Yu Jonghyuk's words. How do you know that? I ignored Kim Namwoon and replied, I know, I'm ready. If your offering is too powerful, You will call the ancient giants. I'll have to meet them eventually. Not now. We will die if we meet them now. There was tension in the expression of the prideful Yu Jonghyuk. There were different types of giants in Tartarus. One type was the rulers of Olympus who caused titanomachy, the ancient giants called the Titans. The other type was the gigantes who caused gigantomachia. If I had to divide them by levels, it was the difference between a myth-grade constellation and a narrative-grade constellation. The ones I dared to call were the gigantes. Don't worry, a Titan-grade giant won't emerge unless there is a high-grade item among the star relics. At this moment, an earthquake occurred. The configuration of Tartarus is becoming unstable. The moment I realized something was wrong, the door suddenly opened, and a huge hand grabbed Yu Jonghyuk. Yu Jonghyuk. I reached out for Yu Jonghyuk as two more hands emerged from inside the door. I hurriedly dodged using electrification, but Kim Namwoon wasn't lucky. Yuak saved me. The next moment, more than 10 hands covered me. My body became a mess in the closed space created by the hands, and by the time I came to my senses, I was hanging upside down in the air. My shaky vision could see the huge hand that grabbed me. The exclusive skill Fourth Wall is strongly activated. Sparks bounced and the status was so full that it filled the surroundings. I felt like my existence could burst apart at any moment. A huge, blunt finger was tapping my ass. There is a cute fly. A huge eye resembling the breaking the sky sword saint stared at me. Chapter 323, Episode 61, Gigantomachia 3. Little child, who are you? 3 of the countless arms that stretched out from the gods were holding me, Yu Jonghyuk and Kim Namwoon. I hung in the air and stared at the giant with disbelieving eyes. The door opened so easily. I couldn't understand it. The door that sealed the place below the 77th floor originally couldn't be opened from the inside. It was the same in the 47th round and the 211th round. That's why I prepared the offering in advance. The probability is difficult. It's getting worse these days. There was a sound and sparks of probability appeared around the bodies of the giants. The giant pulled off one of its fingers and threw it at the door. The sparks rushed like they had been waiting and melted away the finger. Then the sparks slowly faded away. It was an unbelievable sight. The probability was replaced with one finger. Such a thing wasn't possible in any of Yu Jonghyuk's rounds. An aura rose faintly from the giant's body. The depths were hidden by an enormous status that was unfathomable was sleeping inside the giant. One of the oldest existences in the world. Myths accumulated over the years. My heart trembled just counting the years on the surface. This was a titan. It was unmistakably a titan. The myths that stirred in the giant's body were worn but still alive. It was much different from the original novel I knew. The energies of the ancient giant that Yu Jonghyuk met was on the verge of death. It was strange. All the giants relied on the giant stories of titanomachy and gigantomachia. As the influence of the myth weakened or the distortion of the traditions grew, their power weakened as well. Due to the habitual event of Olympus, their giant stories should have been considerably weakened by now. Boy, aren't you going to answer? I am confident in waiting because my patience is as deep as the sea. I have already been waiting a long time, but there is no reason I can't wait longer. However, there was an unbelievable vitality coming from the giant in front of me. Thoughts passed through my head. Maybe it is because I came to the underworld too early. Gigantomachia hadn't happened yet, and perhaps the decline of the giants hadn't exceeded the threshold. The giant continued speaking. However, I don't know if my other friends will be the same. It has been a while since children as delicious as you entered. Kim Namwoon was shaking and didn't even think of answering. The giant stroked Kim Namwoon's cheek like he was cute. You are a child with deep sin. A child like you is delicious to eat. The body of a giant soldier itself. Were you the one torn last time? The prisoners who crashed underground while trying to escape Tartarus were usually fed to the giants. Kim Namwoon struggled and would already be foaming at the mouth if he was human. The giant's gaze turned to me again. You have many good smells. A constellation, angel, demon, human, there is even an outer god. What type of stories are these? I didn't answer. Sometimes this was a clearer answer than words. The opponent might be an ancient god, but I couldn't be intimidated from the start. The status of a demon king is released. I emerged from the grip of the giant, and the giant's appearance became clearer. The size of the giant was beyond my imagination. It was almost 100 meters in height. In the first place, I couldn't fight this existence. I'm going to eat this child. Let's tear him in half. Voices came from all over the place. I opened my mouth and gave a cold warning. We aren't prey. We have come to negotiate. Yu Zhanghyuk also contributed. Yu Zhanghyuk released his transcendence and also escaped the giant's hand. However, the giant replied in an unconcerned manner. It isn't your decision. I knew it would be like this. The destruction of the giants ultimately derived from this arrogance. I used my true voice without further delay. It is nice to meet you. The great 100-handers, the 3 Hecatonchires brothers. At my words, 300 eyes simultaneously opened in the darkness. These eyes belonged to only 3 giants. The 3 giants spoke at the same time. Interesting, you came here knowing about us. 50 heads and 100 arms, the 100-handers. I knew the names of these titans. The strongest storm, Briareus. The rushing stone, Cottus. The changing limbs, Gyges. They were living myths who had experienced both titanomachy and gigantomachia. All the stories of Olympus were accumulated in their bodies. If they were books, I felt like I could sit here for decades reading them. The 4th wall is greedy for the taste. Perhaps this was a myth, the oldest story in the world, things that had been passed down to mortals and finally formed a worldview. The appearance of the 3 gods was the same, but their eyes were different colors. Briareus had blue eyes, Cottus had brown eyes, and Gyges had green eyes. I gazed at the hundreds of eyes and opened my mouth again. I have come to liberate all the giants from Tartarus. My true voice echoed and spread. Perhaps it was enough to be heard by all of Tartarus, not just the Hecatonchires. In the darkness, the sound of some giants moving their bodies was heard. However, nobody opened their mouths. It was because the titans in front of us didn't say anything. The reactions of the Hecatonchires to my words were different. Cottus was grumpy while Gyges looked tired. Only Briareus was different. What a funny joke. I want to eat you even more. I didn't back down despite the intimidating threat and smiled. As you can see, I'm too small for you to taste. You will have to eat more than me. I looked over at Yu Zhanghyuk. As if he had been waiting, Yu Zhanghyuk's muscles started twitching. Soon after, Yu Zhanghyuk's body started to grow. 2 meters, 3 meters, 4 meters. Yu Zhanghyuk's height increased rapidly as he held the black demon sword while gazing at Briareus. Half of the many eyes were filled with doubt. Giant body transformation. How do you have that skill? I learned it from you, Briareus. The power of the breaking the sky swordsmanship filled the black demon sword. Like a little hero going against the myth, Yu Zhanghyuk growled out. To be exact, it was the Yu of the last round. Technically, Yu Zhanghyuk's teacher was only the breaking the sky sword saint. The source of the power he possessed was the breaking the sky swordsmanship trained through countless regressions. However, Yu Zhanghyuk didn't learn only one skill. Through numerous regressions, Yu Zhanghyuk had learnt various techniques from various beings. Giant body transformation was one of them. It was gained through the stigma transmission. In particular, Briareus, who taught the giant body transformation, had a small connection with Yu Zhanghyuk. The evidence was the blue eyes that resembled the breaking the sky sword saint. A little while ago, a young giant visited here. I heard a story in exchange for awakening that child's destiny. I wanted something, but it was about you. In the first Murim, I promised to send the breaking the sky sword saint to Tartarus in exchange for her help. Perhaps breaking the sky sword saint told him about us at that time. I didn't know what the stubborn transcendent had said, but I thought the story might be resolved well. The singularity mentioned by the constellation. The presence moving a giant wagon. The scenario is really heading towards black. There was an unknown tiredness in the voice of the giants who wanted to eat us a while ago. No, it was a voice close to resignation rather than a sense of liberation. I am interested in you. Then how do you want to liberate us? I want to create Gigantomachia. I cut to the chase. I had ended up meeting the Titans, and it wasn't good if I couldn't get the job done. The three Hecatonchires brothers were the protagonists of Gigantomachia and Titanomachy. With these three, it wouldn't be impossible to overturn Gigantomachia. This side is ready, if you try. I refuse. I was a bit hesitant at the decisive answer. Why? Young child, you won't understand. Funnily enough, his words were true. I couldn't understand why they would refuse the offer. The three Hecatonchires brothers and the giants were detained for a long time here in Tartarus. They hated this prison more than anyone and had a deep grudge against the 12 gods. Why did they refuse to be liberated? Kimdokya's head is Badi. I quickly recalled the contents of Ways of Survival, but couldn't come up with the correct insight. The information the giants wasn't described in detail in Ways of Survival. As the contact with the giants increased in the second half of the novel, Yu Jonghyuk would rather pull out his sword than talk. I mean, just like now. Stop, we were really screwed if he moved his sword here. I saw Yu Jonghyuk release the hilt and looked back at the giants. I had to remember. How could I convince these lumps that were tens of thousands of years old? Unexpectedly, Briareus opened his mouth first. Young child, how many Gigantomachias do you think there are in the world? At this moment, letters appeared on the faces of the giants. The stories of the giants were started to speak. The sentences contained very old feelings. The effect of the scenario interpreter is activated. Your understanding of the story has increased sharply. I was able to glimpse the memories of the giants through these sentences. The history of the long-ago Titanomachy and Gigantomachia. The result of all scenarios is fixed. We are just a part of that scenario. We have already fought in numerous Gigantomachias that you don't know. The 60th scenario, Gigantomachia. In that scenario, the giants were trampled on. Olympus won the war and periodically reopened Gigantomachia. The giants were brought to war again and again. They were dressed in ragged clothing and equipment and were hunted by hundreds of armed constellations and incarnations. The bloody wounds were false and their bravery mocked. We were defeated. It happened 10 times. We lost 100 times. Another defeat. It repeated over 1,000 times. Now you are telling us to stand on the battlefield again. Just like the regressor, Yu Jonghyuk. How long will you call out the specters of the past? How long will you turn over the dead shells of the myth and insult them? The giants were regressors in a different sense than Yu Jonghyuk. Finally, they were exhausted by the regressions. Child, we don't want liberation. We are no longer curious about the story. Chapter 324, Gigantomachia 4. Over the years, the giants had forgotten the anger from the first Gigantomachia. The repeated scenarios took away their will and tarnished the glorious days. Now the 60th scenario, Gigantomachia was merely a festival of constellations where several giants were conscripted. Please go back. Rather than resisting the world, the giants chose to be forgotten from the world. Their despair was so huge that I was speechless for a moment. It would have been nice if Yu Sanga was here right now. She was better at convincing people than me. The commanders of a mythical era, they aren't a big deal. It was a uniquely rude tone. Surprisingly, Kim Namwoon was the first one to open his mouth. Lumps, you aren't dead like me. Despite the terrifying status of the giants, his small mouth was still moving. Kim Namwoon shouted in a strangely heightened accent, as if it was his end and he wanted to have no regrets. Those who are alive can change the future, yet you're already giving up. They say that gods are greater than humans and have enormous mental strength. Black Square King Bull Black Square, whining after losing a few times. A bloody aura rose from the giants. I quickly moved in front of Kim Namwoon to stop him. You can still change. This Gigantomachia is completely different from the ones before. History doesn't change. Have you already forgotten that you were betrayed by the god of lightning? Have you forgotten how you fell to the abyss of Tartarus after helping him win Titanomachy? Usanga wasn't around, but I remembered what she told me. Usanga was excellent in world history and mythology. I recalled the time when she persuaded King Hyungmu the Great with her words. How was it during Gigantomachia? It was a fight you could win. It was a fight you could win if it wasn't for the help of human heroes. Do you want to be recorded as a myth that was forever defeated? Cheeky child, you don't understand. I understand. Your despair, I understand it all. It was a lie. It was because I didn't know about them. However, it also wasn't a lie. I know someone who was in the same position as you, but he didn't give up to the end, unlike you. We could only understand the other person through our stories. I knew a man who was desperate thoughts of times in front of a world greater than him, yet never gave up. Yu Jonghyuk and Kim Namwoon looked at me. Briareus asked, whose story are you talking about? The story of a hero I know. I can tell you if you like. Briareus laughed at my words. The deep distrust was filled with ridicule. Hidden behind the wall. The presence behind the wall. At this moment I heard the world creaking. I know that you have a fragment of the last wall. You are hiding behind it and avoiding the attention of other constellations. It was true. Do you think there is any authenticity in the words from such a coward? You can't persuade us. Funnily enough, I couldn't refute the words. It felt like he pointed out something that I had ignored for a long time. The fourth wall is indignant. The fourth wall is saying not to listen. Unexpectedly, it was the constellations who helped me. The constellation, prisoner of the golden headband, condemns the weakness of the giants. The constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, thinks the strongest storm is pathetic. The constellation, secretive plotter, is shaking his head. Briareus was surprised by the sudden burst of indirect messages. You have great sponsors in your channel, specters of the scenario. You still remain. I wonder what the story is that you are chasing after this little boy. I stared at the indirect messages pouring from the air and worried for a moment. I didn't take long to make a decision. I'll release the wall. The constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, is looking at you with astonishment. The constellation, secretive plotter, is watching you with serene eyes. Then will you listen to my story? Kim Dokya can't do chat. There were intense sparks around me as the fourth wall spoke. I can't do it. Just once, it is okay even for a moment. It YLLB Danji Ruse. The fourth wall stood firm. The fourth wall is shimmering faintly. In fact, I wasn't confident either. I wondered if my mind could fully endure it once this wall was completely gone. Still, I had to do it. Absolutely not. I will forcibly turn it off if you don't listen. The fourth wall shook more strongly at my threat. The fourth wall that always protected me. I didn't want to fight it. Eventually, the first one to yield was the fourth wall. No tea everything. Then, one pa RT on lie. The moment I was about to answer, I heard the sound of the sky collapsing. There was an artificial crack in something that was snugly wrapped around me. My head became cloudy and my calm heart suddenly became uneasy. Part of the fourth wall is opened. I started to feel like I was going crazy. My vision turned red and my heart jumped quickly. I was dizzy. Some of my stories released their voices. The story, Hell of Eternity, has begun. The exclusive attribute, Scenario Interpreter, is activated. The things I had been through in the 1863rd round were floating around in my head. I looked out and letters were pouring out from me. It was the story of ways of survival that I had read. In the feast of fascinating stories, I lost my breath for a moment. There was Yu Jonghyuk. It was Yu Jonghyuk of the original novel that no longer existed. Some of the rounds I remembered became fragments and they were passed on to the hecaton chairs. I started retching. I killed him. It shouldn't be like this. I could have stopped it. Even so, I didn't lose my mind. I was obliged to tell this story. Only I remembered this story. I won't give up. 100 times, 1,000 times. I will go back a few times and surely kill all of you. There was Yu Jonghyuk fighting against Olympus. The 150 eyes of the giants widened in unison. I will kill all of you without leaving a single thing left. Yu Jonghyuk's rounds were flowing out. Yu Jonghyuk fought. In the 211th round, he killed one of the 12 gods. In the 325th round, he killed 2 of them. In the 438th round, he killed 4. The number of rounds suddenly exceeded 4 digits. I told you, you will die, he declared. He swung his sword. He put his words into practice. In the meantime, there were the Gigantomachia scenarios where the giants were defeated. Yu Jonghyuk held the heads of the 12 gods and laughed. You can't survive forever. The eyes of the giants were amazed as they looked at the heads of the gods. There was Yu Jonghyuk who kept fighting and fighting. In the 1863rd regression, Yu Jonghyuk slaughtered the constellations. Every time Yu Jonghyuk killed, the fists of the giants shook. In the eyes of the giants, something long lost was waking up again. In the end, the only way to convince someone was the story. The lost sensibility was woken up. Their old willpower was being rekindled. They were being told that life was possible. It was just a story. The exclusive skill, Fourth Wall, is activated. The story was soon cut off. I lost strength and collapsed, only for somebody to help me. They were Yu Jonghyuk and Kim Namwoon. The giants were looking at me. So the giants asked me, what happened next in the story? What happened next? I was well aware of the desire seen in these eyes. Do you want to know? While having the scenario, they were curious about the next scenario. I want to know. Find out for yourself. At my words, the eyes of the giants shook again. The chapped lips that declared they weren't curious about the next story were twitching in unison. The answer came back after a long time. Do you think you can win? I knew what they were asking and answered confidently. I can win. 300 eyes were looking at me. How long had it been? The number of eyes started to increase. 300 became 400 and then 500. In the darkness, countless giants appeared around the 3 Hecatonchires brothers. Giants, listen. The feet of the myths descended. We will fight in Gigantomachia. There was an earthquake along with the sound. All the giants in Tartarus started swarming. One by one, the giants started stomping their feet. Kong, 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 kong. The sound of the feet unceasingly moved to the beat. The giants rose in unison, and a grand spectacle unfolded. Kong, 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 kong. A step towards ruin. I barely breathed as I watched the giants rising like waves in the darkness. It was pretty hard, but it was successful. At this time, Persephone's true voice was heard in the air. You better hurry, demon king of salvation. Olympus has already taken out the giants to join Gigantomachia. Why have they already pulled out giants? You don't know, Gigantomachia has already started. What do you mean? There is still a week. Have you forgotten that time flows differently in the underworld? I made a mistake. The moment I was about to ask for the time outside, I heard the voices of the giants. How many were taken to Gigantomachia? This year there are 4. 4? There is no way. There should be 5 giants in this scenario. The giants gazed at me and answered 4. I quickly opened the smartphone and checked ways of survival. There are 5 giants in this year's Gigantomachia. There was no doubt. According to ways of survival, there should be 5 giants in this year's war. Yet only 4 were pulled out. At this moment I got shivers. I glanced back and saw that Yu Jonghyuk had a serious expression. Kim Dokja. All the giants in the star stream were trapped in Tartarus, apart from one, apart from the half-giant we knew. Chapter 325, Gigantomachia 5. Ha, it is really Earth. Jang Haeyoung sighed as he crossed the portal and swept back his blonde hair. Gwangwamun unfolded before him. He had returned home after a long journey. Are you happy about coming home after a long time? Jang Haeyoung looked back and the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint was exiting the portal. The Breaking the Sky Master moved through her legs. Kyuji's Rodgram was sitting on the Breaking the Sky Master's head. It was the transcendent party who left to train in a different dimension. Not so much. Are you Jang Haeyoung? Jang Haeyoung's words were cut off by a stranger's voice. They turned around and a man was looking at them. Based on his clothes, he wasn't Korean. Yes. Then is the giant behind you the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint? That's right. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint replied, and the man expressed his admiration. Ha, it is a great person. I've been waiting for you. I am called Flying Fox. A mere in person, what do you want? Young Mr. Kim said to wait for you here. Young Mr. Kim, are you talking about that skinny guy? If that skinny guy is referring to Kim Dokja, then yes. Flying Fox kept speaking. The Returnese Alliance will soon invade Seoul. That's what he said. Cheeky student, I told him to come back quickly. Kyuji spoke with a frown. They also knew about the Returnese Alliance. In particular, the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint had heard separate stories from Kim Dokja and Yu Jonghyuk. The Returnese Alliance in the other world line, I was killed by them. Not all returnees chose the virtuous path like Flying Fox. The Returnese Alliance was a representative group that chose the path of violence and domination. It looks like you neglected training in that world, Breaking the Sky Sword Saint. The opponents were the Heavenly Demon and Blood Demon. You can't look down on them. Whoever comes, you won't die in this world. We will fight together. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint laughed lightly at Kyuji's assertion. I don't think I'll die either. If I die here, I can't hit by cute student's butt. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint clenched her fists as she spoke. She didn't know how strong she was in the other world. However, she was certain that now she had stepped into another realm. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint was reminded of the battle with indescribable distance 3 years ago. She couldn't measure the end of that outer god. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint never forgot the terror of that day when she faced a disaster beyond the constellations. She preserved the first Murim and gained a giant story before visiting Tartarus to open the fate of a giant god, the enemy she couldn't deal with. In the last 3 years, the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint had been training for a rematch with the outer god. Then a strange feeling was felt in the distance. Something is coming. Along with Kyuji's words, Jang Haeyoung and the Breaking the Sky Master also took their places. At this timing, it must be the Returnese Alliance. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint quickly issued a command. Kyuji's and I will take care of the Heavenly Demon and Blood Demon. Haeyoung and the Breaking the Sky Master will protect the civilians of Seoul. The next moment, the body of the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint was surrounded by a bright light. The destiny of a giant is found in Namgung Minyeong. What? The forced scenario transfer has begun. The stigma of myth can't be rejected. Master, the startled Jang Haeyoung screamed, but the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint's body had already disappeared somewhere. Even the calm Kyuji's couldn't stop his shaky eyes. Then in the sky, dark clouds started to gather. Kyuji's expression hardened. They are really coming this time. The army of the Returnese Alliance was advancing towards Seoul, a great feast of returnees. The nervous Flying Fox muttered as he moved, "This is dangerous." Wait a minute, Yu Jonghyuk. There is no time. Kim Dokja, haven't you noticed? Yu Jonghyuk's distorted face was angry. The fifth giant is obviously the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint. I know. Originally, the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint wasn't a sacrifice of Gigantomachia. It was because she didn't visit Tartarus, meet her kin, and awaken her destiny. It is because of me. This had happened because I twisted the deployment. Teacher will be in danger if we don't help right away. Didn't you hear that Gigantomachia started? I gazed at Yu Jonghyuk's face and shook my head. She isn't in danger. Rather, she is safe for the time being. Rather, it is someone other than the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint who is in danger. What nonsense are you saying? If teacher is designated as the giant of the scenario. Yu Jonghyuk stopped as he noticed something. He also realized it. In Gigantomachia, The giant hunting event was designated as the last order. Before the start of the hunting event, the giants were given absolute protection in the scenario. If Breaking the Sky Sword Saint was really taking part in Gigantomachia, she would be safe for now. The problem was Earth, where the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint had disappeared from. By now, the returnees' war would have begun. We might have passed the 45th scenario, but not everyone on Earth was the same. The 45 scenario was still in progress, and by now, the March of the Returnees Alliance would have begun. Originally, the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint was supposed to deal with the Returnees Alliance along with the others. Yu Zhanghyuk thought for a while before spitting out, "Seoul is in danger." Of course, Earth was powerful even without the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint. There were Jang Haeyoung, the Breaking the Sky Master, Kyejios, Flying Fox, my mother, and the Wanderer forces. Gong Pildu and Han Mungo on the north side would also help. However, the only ones who could cope with the Heavenly Demon and Blood Demon were the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint and Kyejios. Yu Zhanghyuk struggled for a while before stating, "I will go to Earth. You will take part in Gigantomachia alone." "Is it okay?" "There is no other way." I threw the item I was holding in my hand to him. "Take this." It was the giant's armor that I just received from Briareus. It was the main armor used by Yu Zhanghyuk in the mid to late scenarios. Yu Zhanghyuk grabbed it without a word and escaped from Tartarus with Persephone's help. Kong 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 kong. The giants preparing for war kept stomping their feet. Sub-scenario, myth subversion has begun. The possibility of a new story is germinating. Once this ceremony was over, the real Gigantomachia would begin. I gazed at the giants before calling out to Persephone, "Your Majesty, I'd like to go out as well." "You can't go out." "Huh, didn't you send out Yu Zhanghyuk?" "He isn't a prisoner, however you." I glanced at the message floating in the air. "You are currently imprisoned for committing a criminal offense on the legal zone. Remaining confinement time, 4 hours. Rules are rules." I frowned. There were earth-shattering roars from the giants. If I waited quietly for 4 hours in a place where I didn't know the time rate, I wouldn't be Kim Dokja. "Hey, did we come here to play?" Li Jihai spoke with a blank expression as she looked around. "Welcome to the theme park, Gigantomachia. Olympus, 12 work experience is in progress." The bustling group of incarnations and constellations were busily moving somewhere. Experience capturing a wild boar. Experience hunting a Nama lion. Shin Yusung and Li Gilyung were running around while wearing rabbit ear headbands. I've never seen a place like this. Is this really the outfit that Hercules wore? It had been 8 hours since the group entered the 60th scenario, Gigantomachia. In these 8 hours, the party members had watched a dull video of Olympus, watched a poor 4th-grade monster that was called a mythical wild boar, and even saw a small hydra, less than 5 meters tall, howling while trapped in a cage. This is just an amusement park. Lee Hyun-sung was able to get a lot of apples by participating in the Golden Apple Farm event. The children were preoccupied with playing, and the soldier they believed in was like this. Lee Xiaohua spoke, "The 60th scenario can't be like this. Stay focused." She said this, but a star-shaped headband that she bought as a souvenir was flashing. Lee Jihai looked at Han Soo-young with a stricken expression. "Everybody isn't saying Soo-young Unni, say something." Han Soo-young was sitting on a bench and eating candy. As the distracted group played in the amusement park, Han Soo-young was looking at the progress of the scenario with sharp eyes. The next of the 12 tasks that incarnations and constellations will participate in. In particular, Han Soo-young's eyes were focused on the most important place in the center of the theme park. A man who seemed to be an event helper at first glance was wearing ancient Greek armor and trinkets. There is a thick cover over his heel. There was only one hero in Olympus who had to be careful of his heels, Troy's sorrow, Achilles. He was yawning because the progress of the event was tedious. How much time passed? They've seen enough, so let's go to the point. The relaxed man's tone changed for the first time. Gigantomachia is an event that has been hosted by our Olympus for a long time. Experience the greatest myth in the star stream personally. The gazes of the raucous incarnations focused in an instant. As you know, this scenario is designed for incarnations and constellations who are about to enter the mid to late scenarios. Through this scenario, you have an opportunity to be chosen by the 12 gods of Olympus. Han Soo-young watched the ancient hero speaking like a dakibai and smiled bitterly. They won't use a dakibai for the reputation of the nebula. Of course, they couldn't exercise the authority of a dakibai by doing this, but the performance was enough to stimulate the participants. Is that all? You can also gain a stake in the giant story, thought the giant hunting event. Some incarnations and constellations cheered at the words, stake in a giant story. Achilles laughed and declared, then let's start the game. At the same time, the main hall of the theme park started to open. The sealed sphere opened, and a pale light poured from the air. Introducing the first giant. The light disappeared, and the figure of a legend was revealed. However, the appearance of the giant was smaller than expected. The giant was only around 3 meters tall. Haha, I see some people are disappointed. The first giant is smaller because she is a mixed breed. However, there is no doubt that she has the story of the giants. So everyone, please start hunting. Han Soo-young and the party members were watching the giant. Lee Jihai's mouth was open in a trance as she rubbed her eyes. Then she exclaimed, that person. Lee Hyun-sung, Lee Gil-young, Shin Yu-sung as well. Everyone knew the identity of the giant. It was because the giant was a colleague who had fought with them. The party members' eyes widened as they faced the giant. Main Scenario 60, Gigantomachia has begun. The first game has been decided. Hunt the giant breaking the sky sword saint, Namgung Minyoung. The first prey was Yu Jonghyuk's teacher, the breaking the sky sword saint. Why are you all still? Are you scared? No one moved despite the scenario starting. Thus, Achilles flew through the air. It seems that everyone is afraid since this is the first time you're experiencing Gigantomachia. It isn't a big deal. I'll give you a demonstration. A star relic, the ash spear was held in Achilles' hand, a legendary spear that killed numerous armed men in the Trojan War. The incarnations cried out. Achilles was a hero of Olympus. There were no giants who could go against him. Han Soo-young untied the bandage around her arm. The scenario was important, but they couldn't lose the breaking the sky sword saint here. Look, being afraid of this. Han Soo-young rushed forward as Achilles' spear aimed at the breaking the sky sword saint's heart. Then Han Soo-young stopped. Achilles' charge stopped in the air. The cheers of the incarnation ceased. The breaking the sky sword saint's enormous hand was holding Achilles' head. Whether it is Murim or Olympus, giants always get the same treatment. Achilles hung in the air like a worm and struggled. The more he struggled, the more the muscles on the breaking the sky sword saint's hand became larger. A voice was heard from somewhere. You want to hunt giants? The breaking the sky sword saint's eyes were cold as she stared at the incarnations and constellations. There was a loud sound and Achilles' head was crushed. Then give it a try. Chapter 326, Gigantomachia 6. The ceiling of Tartarus was opening. Cracks have occurred in some areas of Tartarus. Someone is trying to break out of jail. Along with the warning message that appeared in the air, the whole of the underworld was shaking. The judges of the underworld have noticed the actions of the demon king of salvation. Persephone warned in a sharp voice. It is only this time. Please keep this in mind, demon king of salvation. Earthquakes occurred, and a faint portal started to be made on the wide-open ceiling of Tartarus. Persephone had opened an exit to the ground. Briareus watched the scene and asked, "What did you say to make the queen of the underworld help you?" "It was just some threats. 30 minutes ago, I sent the following message to Persephone. If you refuse to cooperate, I will spread the footage of Tartarus all over the star stream." Tartarus had many secrets of the underworld, whether it was the secret recruits they trained or the institutional facilities that were concealed. It wasn't good if the hostile forces to Olympus received a secret report on Tartarus. Then Briareus shook his head. Her Majesty was threatened by that. She is on our side. She just needed a pretext to release me. It is an excuse when things go wrong in the future. If this gigantomachia failed and Olympus picked up on what happened in the underworld would be in a difficult situation. Perhaps my current blackmail would be a bit of a defense for the underworld. Of course, this was a story for when gigantomachia failed, but I didn't intend to let that happen. Briareus spoke. You don't seem to know the king and the queen well. Huh? Briareus gave a knowing smile instead of answering. You have received the giant's oath. You have acquired a new semi-myth story. The story Giant's Liberator has been acquired. This story is attributed to a single story. Giant's Liberator. This was the first story I should obtain from this Olympus war. Giant's Liberator. Soon the giants of this place will enter gigantomachia. Is there anything you specifically want? There is no such thing, just do what you want. I'm becoming curious. Why do you want to reach Black? No other constellations have every built-up achievement like you. Are you dreaming of a perfect story? A perfect story. Some people called a single story by such a name. A story that never existed before and was made up of stories that never existed. I just want to see the end with my colleagues, together without losing anyone. It will be the hardest story in the world. There has never been such a story. It was true. A myth without any sacrifices didn't exist in this world. The probability of the star stream always moves in a way that forces sacrifice. Fate won't easily let you go. I won't know without trying. In addition, fate has already been overcome. I remembered the damn fate given to me by fucking Olympus. Even now, I gritted my teeth remembering it. However, Briareus' expression was grave. Have you overcome fate? Something suddenly flashed through my mind. According to ways of survival, all titans were born with the power of prophecy. Liberator, fate, is a much broader concept than you think. The fate given to you by Olympus is only a speck of dust in the world. The real fate is inevitable. If you avoid it, probability must be distorted. That twisted probability must be resolved by someone. That is why there is no perfect story. I won't know if I don't try. I will do it if possible. My colleagues also aren't weak enough to succumb to fate. I jumped into the portal and declared, then let's meet in gigantomachia. Briareus nodded. I wish you the blessing of the story. Kiagios. Yes. Maybe we need the story's blessing. Jang Haeung muttered as he watched the returnees approaching like cattle. There is no need if you have good training. A sword scattering a silver-white light emerged from behind Kiagios. Pure white paradox. It was a sword made by the masters of Peaceland, Kiagios' home for decades. It was Kiagios' weapon that traveled with him through numerous battlefields and had the same performance as a star relic. The fact that Kiagios, who rarely used a weapon, pulled out the sword proved that the opponents weren't easy. Two figures were flying at the head of the returnees. There was a middle-aged man in a gorgeous red uniform, and one in a black and white uniform engraved with the symbol of his school. Strange, I heard the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint was here. Are you mistaken again? Find the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint. The voices of the middle-aged men were profound. Kiagios shot into the air. The Murim people were surprised by the status that filled the air and instantly stopped. Kiagios opened his mouth. You are the heavenly demon and blood demon. Who are you? Kiagios raised his aura instead of replying. Lightning poured from dark clouds and part of it nestled in Kiagios. Kim Dokja's flagship technique, electrification, was now emitting a sublime aura from the founder. You can't know my name. The astonished returnees stepped back. You will die soon. The white-blue lightning filled the sky. Anyone from Murim would know the name. Is this paradox Sing-Shong? Kiagios' sword pointed towards the sky. As the probability ran wild, Kiagios' status clashed with the returnees. There was a vast wind pressure, and Jang Haeyoung and the Breaking the Sky Master were pushed back. The center of the sky contained the heavenly demon, the blood demon, and Kyejios. Every time an attack poured out, the space screamed like thunder. It was hard to believe that this fierce battle was a confrontation between humans. Jang Haeyoung was ecstatic as he watched the battle. Someday, I can be strong like this. Jang Haeyoung, protect the industrial complex with the Breaking the Sky Masters group. Jang Haeyoung came to his senses due to Kyejios sound transmission, and moved with the Breaking the Sky Master. With the exception of the Heavenly Demon and Blood Demon, there were approximately 1,000 returnees remaining. Among them were the 10 Masters of Murim. A small storm raged around Jang Haeyoung's fist, Kuak. Some returnees were caught in the wind pressure, but dozens of returnees used their bodies as the jumping point. There were too many of them. Evacuate towards the industrial complex. Their side contained Jang Haeyoung, the Breaking the Sky Master, Flying Fox, and other returnees. Apart from Kyejios, only a few incarnations were able to confront the transcendent returnees. In the northern part of the industrial complex, a huge fortress approached while firing. Jang Haeyoung's face became rosy, Gong Pildu. Magic shells poured out from the fortress towards the returnees, and victims instantly appeared. However, the returnees soon maintained their ranks and defended against the shells. Smash that fortress. Gong Pildu's armed fortress was suitable for defense, not attack. 200 returnees gathered and proceeded to Gong Pildu's armed fortress. The number of returnees remaining was 400. The returnees crossed the walls and entered the interior of the industrial complex. Then, as if waiting, the Wanderer forces dedicated to defending the industrial complex moved. Cho Youngren used the power of the first spiritualist of Joseon. Lee Bixun fired her sniper rifle. Jian Wuchai's techniques filled the air and bullets pierced the returnees. Kuok. The shaman killed the shaman. The innocent people were killed like fish caught in the waves. Cho Youngren and Lee Bixun started to be injured by the bombardment of the returnees. The Wanderers were pushed back and some returnees shouted, "Listen up, leader of the Soul area. If you give your life, no more meaningless sacrifices will occur." The key to the returnees' war was to defeat the leader of each force. The core goal of the scenario that the returnees who invaded Seoul received was to defeat the leader. A moment later, a glowing light emerged from inside the industrial complex. Cho Youngren's complexion paled as she kept defending. "No, Sukyoung!" The moment Lee Bixun cried out, a woman emerged from the industrial complex. The Wanderer King declared, "I am the leader of Seoul." In one hand, she was holding the broken 8-beaded bell, and in the other, she as holding a bronze dagger. A few returnees staggered back from the aura that emerged from the heavenly symbols she was holding. "There is no need to be afraid. She can't use the power of her sponsor." The returnees shouted, and Lee Sukyoung smiled bitterly. In the Battle of Dark Castle, most of the Founder's mother's status was destroyed. Even so, she had a way to fight. Establish the center and become the wind. The bronze sword Lee Sukyoung was holding gave off a bright light. The constellation, King Humu the Great, is surprised by the actions of Incarnation Lee. Sukyoung. The constellation, One-Eyed Maitreya, is warning that it is dangerous. The constellation, Coi Il Pil. All the constellations of the Korean peninsula warned her at the same time. She knew. She was already familiar with what would happen if she did this. Lee Sukyoung glanced around the industrial complex. The image of the sleeping Yu Sanga blurred the window. She thought of the children going to Olympus for Yu Sanga's sake. The upright soldier Lee Hyun-sung, Young Hee-won who didn't tolerate injustice, the fierce but brave Lee Gil-young, the calm and gifted Shin Yu-sung. She also remembered Lee Sealhwa, who was warm-hearted and took good care of the party members, and Han Soo-young, who often grumbled but had a keen sense of humor. Then she was reminded of her child, the time for that child to live, the story she long dreamt about, the time she couldn't protect him. The light from the bronze sword was as bright as the sun. Lee Sukyoung muttered very quietly, Emperor of Heaven and the Wind God. There was a constellation associated with each of the star relics of the Korean peninsula. The bronze sword Lee Suk-young was holding right now was one of the heavenly symbols. The constellation Wind God of Heaven is looking down at Incarnation, Lee Suk-young. Wind God of Heaven, one of the three constellations who held the highest rank in Hanguk. Now Lee Suk-young was making her last bet with her life as collateral. Come, Pungbik. The sky opened, and a blue aura roared around the dagger. The returnees blinked at the blinding light. Lee Suk-young looked at the sky, and the sky looked down at Lee Suk-young. Just a moment, please lend me your strength. Then the sky gave a warning. Blue-black lightning struck, and Lee Suk-young responded to the warning. It doesn't matter. The next moment, the sparks of probability appeared around Lee Suk-young's body. Her bones were crumbling and her skin was burnt. Amidst this pain, the hand holding the sword became heavy. The force of wind that a human couldn't endure was nestled in her right hand. This was one of the strongest constellations on the Korean peninsula, the power of Pungbik. From left to right, Lee Suk-young swung her sword. Then the space was split apart. It was as if the world was split in half from the beginning. Everything around her was torn by the absolute wind pressure that followed the trajectory of her sword. At 10, 20, 30, the number of returnees who died quickly surpassed 100. All the returnees who crossed the walls were falling through the air with their waist cut. Their faces showed they didn't understand the source of their death. Lee Suk-young held her trembling right hand and took shaky breaths. In one blow, most of the returnees were destroyed. Of course, it wasn't everyone. There were returnees who noticed the danger in the short time and moved out of range. They were masters from the 3rd Murim and 4th Murim. It's over, kill her. Lee Suk-young glanced at the masters rushing towards her and smiled. She did everything she could. Dozens of swords rushed towards her as she fell through the air. There was the sound of flesh being pierced, and Lee Suk-young sensed death. However, she didn't feel the pain of being stabbed. She opened her eyes to see someone's back. It was a very wide back. Chapter 327, Gigantomachia 7. Lee Suk-young. Yoo Jong-hyuk was there. The image that followed was the master's necks being pierced. The lifeless bodies crashed to the ground. I didn't expect to get your help. Yoo Jong-hyuk ran with a blank expression and Lee Suk-young on his back. Lee Suk-young didn't say anything, but she could see where he was heading. Perhaps he was looking for the medical staff of this industrial complex. Thank you. The words spilled out and Yoo Jong-hyuk replied indifferently. Don't say anything that isn't in your heart. I know you dislike me. Of course I dislike you. I hate you. You are the person who took my role. I don't know what that means. In Lee Suk-young's head, time flowed slowly. She heard that it should move quickly, then why? Was it because it was hard and difficult? I've known you from a long time ago. That kid often talked about you. He came to visit his mother in prison and only talked about this. This time, he challenged the 12 gods of Olympus. The young face of Kim Dokja as he talked happily. Many thoughts had floated on this child's face. Yoo Jong-hyuk spoke like he felt Lee Suk-young's heart rate slowing down. Lee Suk-young, don't let go of your mind. Lee Suk-young barely maintained her blurring consciousness. She continued to be drowsy on Yoo Jong-hyuk's back. In any case, at least once, I wanted to thank you. You are saying things that I can't understand. The back that was now carrying her had actually carried her son. The middle school Kim Dokja and the high school Kim Dokja, he was the support. He raised the child she couldn't carry. He made the child live. I thought that I wanted to be like him. However, she was the one who wanted to be the owner of that back, more than anyone else. Then what did Yoo Jong-hyuk do next? Are you curious, mother? Her son's words continued throughout the visitation that only lasted 10 minutes. Yes, I'm curious. The two people spoke and listened with a wall between them. A story with adventure and life. The story of someone who wasn't related to her or her son, but who lived hard. It was like talking through a wall. The two people talked about ways of survival during those days. The fictional story was their only possession. Now that story had become reality and was carrying her. Lee Suk-young murmured in a soft voice, "I was finally living my life." "Don't tell me." Yu Jonghyuk's back was wet with blood. Lee Suk-young's complexion was gradually fatting. There were still sparks of probability around her. In her damaged flesh, the stories she had accumulated were evaporating. In order to conceal it, Lee Suk-young purposefully asked about things she knew. "Where are your parents?" "I was told they died in an accident." "You don't sound sad." "I can't grieve what I can't remember." Lee Suk-young knew. He didn't remember because it wasn't in the original novel. Everything about Yu Jonghyuk was just a character setting. From the beginning, Yu Jonghyuk's parents didn't exist. Lee Suk-young hesitated for a moment. "Yes, humans are like this. Do you think I remember all my childhood?" "Is it memory loss?" "Everyone gets memory loss. Little by little, we will forget our memories, and one day, we will forget everything." Lee Suk-young knew that her words wouldn't reach Yu Jonghyuk, a regressor who had lived 3 rounds. For an immortal man who would live an unknown amount of time in the future, her words would be lighter than the weight of dust. Yu Jonghyuk spoke, "Sometimes I remember things. I remember someone watching me." It was the first time Lee Suk-young heard this story, and she wondered, "Who was watching you?" "I don't know either. There was a gaze watching me for a long time. There were times when I often felt the gaze." After Yu Jonghyuk's words were over, Lee Suk-young didn't talk for a long time. There was a long silence before Lee Suk-young laid her hands on Yu Jonghyuk's head and spoke in a gentle voice. "Maybe it was your parents." Lee Suk-young stared up at the sky. Numerous constellations were watching them. Her flesh was breaking. She felt the stories gradually pouring away from her body. Her vision was blurry as Lee Suk-young kept trying to watch the sky. It was as if she was trying to find a star somewhere. "Lee Suk-young." Lee Suk-young's answer was no longer heard. There was a bloody wind blowing in the theme park where the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint appeared. Since Achilles' head was blown off as a demonstration, several constellations rushed forward in succession, but received the same fate. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint's fists were covered in red. "You want to recreate Gigantomachia with just this?" The scared participants hesitated when the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint's voice rang out. Han Soo-young and the party members watched the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint from the fortress they were hiding behind. Lee Ji-hai spoke, "We don't need to help." "Can't we just hide here?" Lee Gil-young added. Han Soo-young murmured while chewing on candy. "This doesn't make sense. Can a giant be so strong in Gigantomachia?" It was an indisputable fact that the giants were strong. However, this was Gigantomachia, a scenario where the giants were defeated. In this scenario, the giants weren't able to use their strength due to the influence of stage transformation. Furthermore, against a hero like Achilles. "I underestimated this half-breed giant." The forgotten Achilles, whose head had been destroyed, was waking up. The constellation, Troy's Sorrow, has invoked the immortal hero stigma. His crushed head was restored, and the blood pouring from his body stopped. Achilles won't die until Achilles' heel is cut. This was the strongest skill of the hero Achilles. The regenerated Achilles was larger than before. His height reached over 3 meters, and the surrounding incarnations muttered, "Giant." Achilles' body became as big as a giant. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint asked, "Are you a giant half-breed?" How funny. A person who inherited the blood of the giants became a servant of Olympus. "I'm not a giant. I am Olympus hero Achilles." Han Soo-young watched the collision between the two giants and understood why stage transformation hadn't activated yet. Achilles was a hero of Olympus, but he wasn't a source of Gigantomachia in the past. Moreover, he was a mixed-blood giant like the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint. A shockwave created by the clash between giants shook the theme park. Achilles touched the palm of his hand like he couldn't believe it. "Why does a half-breed have this power? I've never heard of your name. What type of story do you have?" The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint stared at the sky without speaking. "My distant blood is said to have been castrated by the sky." She was transcendent. Unlike other constellations, she only had a few stories because she pursued the highest strength. There was only one path she had ever walked. The story path of breaking the sky has started. It was the power to break the sky, which gave her the name of Breaking the Sky Sword Saint. An indirect message was heard as stories flowed steadily from the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint. The power to break through the sky is favored by the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint. The strength of breaking the sky is opened. Achilles was astonished by the message. A giant who breaks the sky, don't tell me. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint opened her mouth. You will have the same fate. There was a terrible aura flowing from the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint's body. It happened the moment the faltering incarnation stepped back. A large horn sound was heard from somewhere. The nebula Olympus is in full swing. In the distance, a ship was coming from the sea. It was Argo. The giant story, Fellowship of Heroes, has started. The incarnations discovered a giant ship moving across the water and screamed. It was because they knew who was riding the ship. The heroes, the real heroes, are coming. The constellations of Gigantomachia. The real heroes who fought in Gigantomachia, unlike Achilles, were coming. There were also constellations flying in the sky. The narrative-grade constellations of Olympus. It was a power that was not comparable to Achilles. The Starstream has announced the opening of the new stage. Finally, the stage transformation was going to begin. The momentum of the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint started to rise sharply. Achilles regained his courage and laughed at the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint. Ha ha ha, young giant, you don't know the calamity you have brought, you. However, he couldn't finish his words. It was because someone popped out from another portal and destroyed his head. Achilles collapsed to the ground after his head was burst twice in a row. The man knocked down Achilles and didn't hesitate to cut his heel. The constellation Troy's sorrow has died in pain. Achilles' giant body dispersed. Han Soo-young laughed as she saw the white coat blowing in the wind. Shit, you should have come quicker. Kim Dokja had returned from the underworld. Kim Dokja sighed lightly and looked at the party members. Kim Dokja's company, are you ready? Kong 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 kong. Heavy footsteps were heard from somewhere. There was a deafening roar from the ground as countless mountains appeared in the sky. The giant mountains sprang up and destroyed the theme park. On the edge of a mountain, Kim Dokja declared, now let's start the real Gigantomachia. Chapter 328, God's Enemy 1. The Starstream has confirmed the possibility of a new giant story. The interpretation of old stories is possible. The characters who appeared in the myth are reconstructed. Based on past myths, stage transformation will occur. After seeing the indirect messages popping up one after another, the great Dakibai Noxu was silent. Originally, the 60th scenario Gigantomachia wasn't relayed by the Dakibus. They only had channel and airing rights while the actual progress was done by the sub-heroes of Olympus. However, the situation had changed. There was an explosion on the screen and roars as the giants emerged from the ground. Where the hell did the giants appear from? Underworld. What is going on in the underworld? Shouldn't they be trapped in the underground prison? Now Gigantomachia was a completely different story. Who will relay it? Noxu turned and asked two advanced Dakibai. I'll do it. No, I will. They were the director of the Korean branch Bihyung and the director of the Japanese branch Dokgek. The two gazes met and currents filled the air. Dokgek exclaimed, Great Dakibai, Bihyung can't do this. He has been broadcasting Incarnation Kim Dokja for too long. I'm familiar with him so I can broadcast it better. In addition, since when will you still call him Incarnation? He is a constellation. On the screen, the incarnations of Kim Dokja's company were seen fighting the heroes. Their appearance of taking precise formations and releasing their status was reminiscent of glittering constellations centered on a single star. The sound of chewing popcorn was heard from somewhere, very noisy. Do Dakibus normally talk like this? The red wine in the glass was sucked into the man's mouth. Then, one of the heroes of Olympus died on the screen. The constellation, God of Wine and Ecstasy, is cheering. The constellation, God of Wine and Ecstasy, has sponsored 3,000 cons to the Demon King of Salvation. At this absurd sight, Bihyung asked, "Aren't you a member of Olympus? Can you be sitting her leisurely?" "What do you know? I'm not really close to them. In addition, aren't you the ones who said I can take a tour today?" Like any cheerer on the street, Dionysus had a flag with his team on his back. The flag was covered with "Olympus is doomed." Dokgek's eyes narrowed. The 12 gods of Olympus would have gathered at Olympus Temple by now. "I want Kim Dokja to win." Huh. The Dakibus were in an uproar from the remark that was like a bomb. Dionysus laughed heartily. "What are you so surprised? I can support anyone. In addition, you shouldn't react like this. Don't you only need a fun scenario?" It was true, making the Dakibus frown at the words. Dokgek opened his mouth. "The thing you are expecting won't happen." Dokgek's words caused Bihyung's expression to darken. In fact, Kim Dokja's company fighting against Olympus was ridiculous. Breaking a rock with a quail egg had more of a chance than this. In addition, it overlapped with the Earth side. Bihyung watched Gigantomachia with one eye while the other saw Yu Jonghyuk running with Lee Sukyoung on his back. At this moment, Dionysus opened his mouth again. It is unknown if the story is a tragedy or a comedy until this is over. Isn't it obvious? Gigantomachia is such a scenario. Gigantomachia is just one of the many giant stories that Olympus had. You might belittle them as long as they're not there, but you can't afford to overlook the lucky punch. The probability of it happening is close to 0%. That probability will happen. Isn't that why I'm here? Dionysus watched the screen while shoving popcorn in his mouth. The key is how to make the dizzy fish come out. More than half of the 12 gods had gathered. They were in the form of symbolic objects that represented themselves. The first one to speak was a trident. The distinguished lightning throne didn't come this time, and Dionysus is missing. That's correct. The waters around the temple boiled up like the sea was furious. Some symbolic bodies looked at each other nervously, and the trident kept speaking. Then why did the giants wake up again? It is a group that broke out from Tartarus. The one who answered with a constellation with the symbol of a pair of swords. The trident asked again, Hades let them go. It was said they performed the myth ritual. The myth ritual. They must have sacrificed a great probability. Did everybody's mother wake up? No, it was the 3 Hecatonchires brothers who moved. All 3 of them went out. It is Briareus alone. It is said he lost half his 100-handers. They were probably lacking probability for all 3 to leave. It was silent. Then the blazing sun spoke. "We can't sit idly by. Kim Dokja's company, the small nebula, is provoking us. We need to severely punish them." Then a winged shoe with numerous data windows around it spoke. "It won't be easy. Like the 3 chiefs, the master of the nebula has received the indication of the end black hint." "Is that true, Hermes?" "Yes." It is funny. The master of the nebula is building a story on the same level as the lightning throne. There was a stir in the group. A single story was a sensitive topic for the 12 gods. The constellations were all seeking the ultimate story. There was no one who wasn't interested in the hint of the end. It was the trident who arranged things. "Quiet. Everyone is busy and there is a lot of work to do. We will start the vote." Everyone in the place fell silent. The reason why so many gods gathered was due to the 60th scenario. In response to the provocation of Kim Dokja's company, I, as chairman, am calling for the deployment of the story weapon. Then the voting began. The constellation, God of Marriage and the Home, declares abstention. The constellation, Organizer of Agriculture and the Seasons, declares neutrality. The constellation, Spokesman of Justice and Wisdom, declares that we must withdraw the justice the humans don't know about. The constellation, Atrocious War God, wants to fight the giants. The constellation, Almighty Sun, wants to burn a petty nebula. The constellation, Volcanic Blacksmith, wants to make a weapon to fight against the giants. The constellation, pure hunter of the moonlight, rejects a meaningless war. The constellation, goddess of love and beauty, says she will abstain from this superficial vote. The constellation, master of the skywalk, says the issue shouldn't be approached so simple. The big data should be examined, the nature of the case reviewed, and the patterns of the enraged giants. Hermes, just say it. The constellation, master of the skywalk, is against the war. Several constellations were surprised by the declaration. You are a coward, Hermes. He always goes against the will of the temple. Hermes didn't say anything. Meanwhile, the result of the votes came up. Agree, 4 votes. Disagree, 2 votes. Abstain, 3 votes. There was only one last vote left. Of course, it was the chairman's vote. The constellation, spear that parts the boundaries of the sea, is demanded the release of the weapon. Agree, 5 votes. All seats have voted apart from the non-attendees. The gods nodded. Apart from those who abstained, more than half are in favor, and I am declaring the release of the story weapon. A hammering sound rang through the temple, while an ominous foam rose from the sea. The direction of the foam was the theme park Gigantomachia, where the giants were gathering. We need a commander to lead the weapons. The great grade constellations will go together, but they can't deal with the giants alone. Who will you send? I will approve some gods to move. You will be in an incarnation body, and I hope you assist them without hesitation. Then somebody raised their hand. I will go. After Achilles' incarnation body collapsed, the incarnations fell into panic. Several incarnations fled when they saw the mountains of giants rising everywhere. In the chaos, several incarnations shouted, "Why are you doing this? What the hell is this?" The astonishment and resentment of the incarnations were soon directed towards me. I asked in return, "Why are you doing what? What did I do?" "We missed the chance to get a star relic because of you." It was a chance to get a story about catching a giant. I was going to catch the eyes of the 12 gods and join Olympus, now because of you. Gigantomachia. With a participation fee of 100,000 coins, they got a chance to gain hidden pieces and, if lucky, a piece of a giant story. That opportunity was now disappearing into a handful of dust in front of their eyes. I watched the incarnations and wondered, do you really think that Gigantomachia is such a naive event? Perhaps they were right. There actually were incarnations and constellations who were strengthened through Gigantomachia. In addition, many of them likely became members of Olympus. Let's say you join Olympus, then what will you do? What? In a nebula already occupied by the 12 gods and the ancient constellations, what can you do? Through ways of survival, I saw the words of countless incarnations who had joined Olympus. The incarnations were bound by unusual contracts and collected crude stories, as they were used in the long term for various scenarios. All the incarnations of last year's Gigantomachia climbed to the top scenario. They. Are you talking about them? The people turned their heads in the direction I pointed. There were countless ships crossing the sea, including Argo. Among the ship's passengers, the participants of last year's Gigantomachia were also seen. Why are they? Gigantomachia. The myths recorded it as a fight between the giants and the gods and heroes of Olympus. However, most incarnations weren't aware of how the heroes who participated in the war were made. Many constellations are excited. The gods were afraid of the giants and mass-produced heroes from humans for Gigantomachia. The constellations of the nebula Olympus are showing hostility towards you. Even after the end of Gigantomachia, it was unknown how many incarnations were being mobilized for this reenactment war. It was a scenario that ate and produced itself, like a snake biting its own tail. A number of constellations have entered the channel. A large number of constellations can't hide their excitement for Gigantomachia. The constellations who hated the scenario reached the end of the scenario and enjoyed the scenario. They desperately climbed the ladder of the scenario, mocked the incarnations, and kicked the ladder towards the top. The victim of the tragedy became the subject of the tragedy. I declared towards the horror-stricken incarnations, I want to break the scenario. Chapter 329, God's Enemy 2. Break the scenario, what are you saying? The people made expressions that showed they didn't understand. It was natural. There was no way they thought they could break the scenario. The scenario had become a condition of life for them. You are a splendid constellation. Do you think you can contend with Olympus? I turned after hearing someone's voice and saw a familiar big man. He had a bushy beard and held a long spear. It was a constellation I knew. That's right. Q-Hat, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask for your name. I am the Demon King of Salvation. Demon King of Salvation. Some of the incarnations and constellations who heard my modifier immediately responded. Is it the Demon King's selection? The Demon King who knocked down Surya. The man with the big spear came forward and said, I am called Protector of Changban. Protector of Changban, it is Zhang Fei. Zhang Fei struck his massive chest. I want to help you. I didn't want to play this childish game, but now I'm getting heated up. He threw away the items harvested from Olympus theme park. It was the head of a young hydra, a golden apple and fake golden fleece. I nodded and said, good. If Zhang Fei had this equipment, he would definitely be a big power. However, it wasn't enough. The hidden scenario, myth subversion, has affected the main scenario. I glanced around at the other incarnations and constellations and stated, now choose. The incarnations looked between me, the terrible giants and Argo crossing the sea. Do you want to be stuck to the back of a giant nebula and be their limbs for a lifetime? Or do you want to be the master of a new myth along with the mythical giants? The contents of the main scenario that you and your nebula received will be updated. Main scenario 60, Gigantomachia. Category Main. Difficulty level SSS+. Clear conditions. The ancient giants have come to the Gigantomachia battlefield. You can join the battlefield by taking the side of the giants or Olympus. Cut the neck of the enemy leader and declare the advent of a new myth to the star stream. Time limit. Compensation, a new giant story. Failure, partial disappearance of the giant story. If the enemy's incarnation body is destroyed, the corresponding scenario will end. Each faction has 2 leaders. The moment the scenario updated, a green arrow flashed over my head. You already belong to a force. You are one of the 2 leaders in charge of the giant forces. The incarnations around me were silent. They had probably received the updated scenario. The constellation, prisoner of the golden headband, is delighting in this spectacle. The constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, is delighting in your suffering. The constellation, secretive plotter, is wondering about your strategy. Then the bombardment started from the sea. Han Suyung's voice was heard behind me. Kim Dokja, how long are you going to stand there? Do you want to just watch? I drew my sword and descended from the shoulder of a giant. Let's start. How are we going to fight? Our power is overwhelmingly lacking. Han Suyung's words were true. I wouldn't say it was overwhelming, but less than 10 giants had passed through the portal with me. Furthermore, Briareus of the Hecaton chairs was a core power, but he hadn't yet appeared on the field. Perhaps he was the other leader. Kill the giants. A true voice emerged from somewhere, and the human heroes leapt from Argo to attack the giants. The stage transformation of Gigantomachia is occurring. There were sparks and the surroundings changed. The ancient battlefield. It was the land of massacre where the first Gigantomachia occurred. The constellations of Olympus came flying through the air. Most of them were great grade, but once they joined forces and attacked the giants, the situation suddenly tilted. The supreme giants will kneel down to the combined forces of the heroes and gods. The giants were kneeling down one by one before the combined efforts of the constellations and heroes. My group tried to help the giants, but we were blocked by the shells coming from the sea. Li Hyunsung exclaimed, I think we have to do something about that story weapon. The story weapon, Argo. The ship of the Olympus heroes was launching shells that contained enormous magic power. It was difficult to even approach the sea. Of course, it was expected. Have you forgotten who we have? I stared at a girl standing among the party members. Me. To be exact, I looked at the constellation behind Li Jihai. The constellation, maritime war god, is looking at you. Li Jihai shouted, "Are you crazy? You want me to deal with that?" Olympus, Argo, was much bigger than Li Jihai's ghost fleet. It was the size difference between a patrol ship and a destroyer. It was natural to think it was impossible. You can do it. I knew Li Jihai could indeed do it. You can definitely do it if you are with your sponsor. As the constellations of the Korean peninsula watched, the maritime war god was looking up at the sky. A constellation who had been confined to the Korean peninsula for a long time. He had to carry the name of the country on his back. The constellation who had to remain a symbol of the nation he dedicated his life to. One day, Goryeo's first sword had said, "Among the great grade constellations of the Korean peninsula, only the Duke of Loyalty and Warfare can compete with me." Then why did Yi Sun-sin remain at the great grade, despite Goryeo's first sword become a narrative grade constellation? The constellation, maritime war god, is looking at his fellow people. It was because he refused to be narrative grade. The constellation Coi Pil wants maritime war god to fight for himself. It was the moment when a great grade constellation became narrative grade. The moment when a single constellation left his nation and moved towards his own path. A dazzling radiance emerged from Li Jihai's body. The constellation Maritime War God is opening his status. The Duke of Loyalty and Warfare released himself, as if revealing everything about him. The star stream is staring at the constellation Maritime War God. The sky of the scenario looked down at the Duke of Loyalty and Warfare. Like a seasoned actor who had been hiding his capabilities, the Duke of Loyalty and Warfare under the sky was magnificent and bold. It was a spirit that didn't retreat or feel fear. Many constellations are surprised by the status of the maritime war god. After a long time, the Duke of Loyalty and Warfare was finally leaving the Korean peninsula. The star stream has accepted the promotion of maritime war god. The constellation, Maritime War God, has become a narrative-grade constellation. Jihai, the opening of Gigantomachia started with the promotion of the Sea Admiral, Smash It All. Li Jihai was surrounded by the spirit of the Maritime War God and raised her sword. The character Li Jihai has activated the Stigma Ghost Fleet LV-10. The status of the sponsor has risen, and the destructive power of the Ghost Fleet is rising rapidly. 12 ships appeared at the shoreline. The ships had already grown to the size of a destroyer. Those who seek death shall live, those who seek life shall die. The cannons of the 12 ships fired simultaneously. The number of enemy shells that never ceased firing slowly started to change. The front of Argo was crumbling. The number of shells dropped sharply, and there was the sound of the hull exploding. The solid Argo was shaking. We equipped ourselves to defend against the shells and moved our feet. We cut down the Olympians running towards the giants and moved forward. Maybe they thought this couldn't continue anymore, and the heroes of Argo came out. Everybody land. The intense true voice was heard from Argo's expedition leader, Wind Expedition King. Argo, expedition leader Jason. The giants can't stop humanity and gods from joining together. The winner of this war is already fixed. The army poured out along with this shout. I took the lead while speaking to the faltering group members. There is no need to be afraid. We aren't giants. We weren't giants. In other words, stage transformation didn't have an influence on us. The large Jason came this way, and a man on our side ran towards him. I'll take this big one. It was Lee Hyun-sung. Lee Hyun-sung collided with Jason with a tremendous amount of force and bellowed as they had a battle of strength. Hallelujah. Jason was surprised by the tremendous strength that forced him to be pushed back. In the latter half of Ways of Survival, Lee Hyun-sung wasn't pushed by an incarnation or constellation in strength. Coordination with the constellation, Master of Steel, has increased. Lee Hyun-sung's upper body was covered by a shell of steel. The level of Lee Hyun-sung's steel transformation was extremely high. His body wasn't touched at all despite being punched by a hero. In the sky, Shin Yu-sung and Lee Gil-young were flying on the dragon. Shin Yu-sung avoided the heroes with dragon-slaying stories and fired a breath. The sea was instantly poisoned, and the enemies were cut by Lee Gil-young's insect kings. Lee Sealhwa used poison against the heroes while Han Soo-young used the black flames and blocked the constellations of Olympus. Now they all had the ability to deal with great-grade constellations. The 10 or so nebula members were fighting against the constellations of a mighty nebula. The incarnations observing the situation in the back were shocked. What? Olympus seems to be pushed by that small nebula. This was the effect I had intended. The battle was still in its infancy. I had to appeal with strength to bring in reinforcements. However, the god of victory still wasn't on our side. It finally appeared. I looked at the 20 meters high monster filling my field of view. It wasn't a human, no matter how I looked. Gleaming golden armor, a cloak made of lion leather wrapped around it. Those who knew Greek mythology couldn't not know his name. Some of the giants shrieked at the majestic appearance. Hercules. The hero's status, that even the 12 gods were reluctant to go against, dominated the entire battlefield. I looked up as a dark shadow covered the surrounding area and smiled bitterly. If I wanted to deal with this monster, then I had to call a monster as well. It took me so long to get here. Naturally, I wouldn't withdraw from here. The sword designed to cut a sleeping giant, I quietly stated, now descend upon this place. Come Kim Namwoon. Chapter 330, God's Enemy 3. A swirling portal appeared in the sky. The constellation, Queen of the Darkest Spring, is looking at you. Pluto's license was obtained from Hades. I could use Pluto freely in the limited time Gigantomachia was held. Ha-ha-ha, Grasshopper Man. You memorized the starting change despite not liking it. It was Kim Namwoon's mischievous voice. However, the giant soldier didn't appear immediately. There was only the darkness of the abyss visible beyond the swirling portal. By the way, can you wait 10 minutes? The summoning circle is damaged and I can't go straight away. The giants stomped their feet too many times. Damn it, Heracles was emitting a white light and looking my way with blank eyes. TL, small change from Hercules in the last chapter. It couldn't be helped. I had to buy as much time as possible. I stepped forward and shouted, Heracles, hero of the 12 tasks. Heracles stared at me. The red arrow above Heracles' head was flickering. The constellation is a leader of Olympus. As expected, he was one of the 2 leaders of Olympus. According to the myths, Heracles was a man who killed the leader of the giants in Gigantomachia. Many constellations in ways of survival spoke about him. As long as Heracles is present, the winner of Gigantomachia won't change. Numerous incarnations cheered when they saw Heracles. Oh, Heracles, Heracles. Heracles, the hero of Olympus who left countless myths and folklore. Despite the many stories that resonated through the star stream, the number of constellations who actually saw Heracles could be counted on one hand. He was a demigod, a mix between a god and human. He had a body of steel. The stories of the protector of Olympus circulated around him. The story man who strangled the lion of Nemea has begun. The story man who beat up the giant boar has begun. The story man who overpowered a Cerberus with bare hands has begun. A tremendous amount of stories were shining in Heracles' body. At first glance, they seemed like crazy stories. Every one of them was at the very least legendary grade stories. The scale of his giant stories was incomparable, but I didn't start the game without knowing this. Once again, rumors in the star stream can't be believed. I spoke in a provocative voice and Heracles' fist flew towards me. The exclusive skill bookmark is activated. Miniaturization and electrification were activated. Heracles' fist passed over the top of my head and made a crater in the ground where I had been standing. I was swept back by the ignorant power, but I didn't stop the provocation. Your punch is only this much. I don't know if this was enough to overpower the giants. An angry cry seemed to burst from Heracles' body. I know many stories about you. You caught the lion of Nemea, killed a hydra, hunted a Stymphalian bird. They are incredible stories for one person to accomplish in a short period of time. Finally, a true voice burst out from Heracles' body. That's right. That is me, Heracles. It was creepy hearing the voice. It might be equivalent to the 12 gods, but as a result, I was even more convinced. I heard a rumor that you were born for Gigantomachia. Your 12 tasks were trials for the victory of Gigantomachia. Some constellations are interested in your words. The constellation, demon-like Judge of Fire, is worried about you. I didn't know how he took my words, but Heracles banged on his chest. It was a spectacular sight to see a monster over 20 meters tall doing such a thing. I kept speaking. Then one of my close colleagues heard your story and raised a question. I suppressed my boiling anger. The original Heracles was born after the Great Disaster period. Then how could he participate in Gigantomachia, which occurred before that? It was none other than you, Sangha, who said this. A stir occurred among the constellations in the channel. Heracles' eyes gleamed angrily as his true voice rang out. Arrogant guy, are you saying this Heracles is a lie? Yes, not just you but all of the 12 gods. Heracles was silent at my answer. You made many false stories. You did this by manipulating them. Heracles clearly looked embarrassed. I was surprised as well. If you kept talking and talking nonsense, it might someday become a real story. 1,000 years, 2,000 years. The lies were repeated for tens of thousands of years. Once it becomes a story, it can be said to originally exist. Isn't it amazing? I am Heracles, Heracles of Gigantomachia and the symbol of Olympus. Yes, perhaps in another world line. Somewhere in another world, you really killed Nemea's lion and the hydra. The constellation, secretive plotter, is making an interested smile. I stared up at the sky as I spoke. I moved through the 1863rd round and remembered the countless rounds that you, Jonghyuk, went through. However, that isn't the case in this world. In this world, a hero like Heracles doesn't exist. It is because Heracles is the name of the story weapon you created. Zeus, the god of lightning, had sowed his seed in preparation for Gigantomachia. As always, the seed here was a metaphor. Zeus feared the giants and collected miscellaneous hero stories from across the world. Nemea's lion, golden-horned deer, bull of Crete, hydra of 9 heads. Stories were gathered and created a single character. This character was soon shaped into a story weapon. It was created to fight against the giants, using human souls as power, a weapon that brought the fear of massacre to numerous battlefields in the star stream. Giant soldier Heracles, the constellation prisoner of the golden headband, is surprised. The constellation, bald general of justice, resents the atrocities of Olympus. The constellation queen of the darkest spring has a cold expression. The constellation spokesman of justice and wisdom has shaky eyes. Many constellations are shocked by the identity of Heracles. Perhaps most constellations were unaware of this story. It was natural. It was a truth that only I, who read Ways of Survival, and a few of the 12 gods who made Heracles knew about. Many constellations have entered channel BY9158. The constellations in the channel suddenly increased, and BU cried out tearfully. A large number of constellations are questioning the identity of Gigantomachia. The stage I wanted was finally going to be completed. Heracles' mythical identity is shaken. The identity of Heracles has influenced the reproduction of stage transformation. I stared at Heracles. The exclusive skill reading comprehension is activated. You have learned about the other person's composition of stories due to the attribute effect. He is a god of war born only for war, holding fear in the right hand and anxiety in the left hand. He left discord every time he walked through a fight in front of him. The stories of a constellation flowed through Heracles' giant soldier. They weren't Heracles' stories. Heracles was a giant soldier. If so, there was someone riding him, and I knew who that person was. I cried out in my true voice, "Atrocious war god, are you a coward who fights behind a giant soldier?" A huge storm of wind blew around Heracles' body. The heroes and constellations fighting in a bloody manner around him were pushed back dozens of meters. I would have flown to the horizon if I hadn't used Way of the Wind through bookmark. Ares opened his mouth. In the past, many people who spoke bad words to Olympus didn't have a good fate. Oedipus and Prometheus as well. No one was an exception. Unlike the fierce outburst, Ares' true voice was unexpectedly calm. "You have spoken more words than anyone I've seen." It happened the moment Heracles aimed a fist at me. 10 minutes had passed. Pluto appeared in the sky and blocked Heracles' fist. I literally flew through the air and entered Pluto's cockpit. "The giant soldier Pluto has confirmed your boarding." The giant soldier Pluto has confirmed the Master's constellation. Your story will be assimilated with giant soldier Pluto. I was comfortably embraced by the giant soldier's body. It was like soft muscles were wrapped around my body, and I could see the vision of the giant soldier. The power of the story weapon enveloped my entire body. This was one of the strongest story weapons of Ways of Survival, giant soldier Pluto. Eek. I feel like there is a parasite in my stomach. As Kim Nam-woon was making a fuss, Han Soo-young spoke through midday tryst. "Can you do it? This is the giant soldier Heracles. You only have Kim Nam-woon." The rating of the giant soldier was determined by the quality of the soul used as the material of the giant soldier. In addition, the soul used for the original Pluto wasn't Kim Nam-woon. In other words, the current Pluto was much weaker than the original Pluto. Kim Nam-woon is pretty good. Situation is completely different from when you smash the factory in the demon world. You think I don't know that? He can do it. Serious? Perhaps it would be impossible originally, but I learned something from you. From me. I rushed towards Heracles. Heracles amplified his body volume to match Pluto and also headed towards me. 4 hands collided, and the fierce wind pressure created a whirlpool in the sea. Ares was surprised when Pluto showed a strength comparable to Heracles. "A giant soldier, where did you get it?" "I scammed it from someone just like you." From the start of the Demon King selection to the 1863rd round, I had been preparing for Gigantomachia. It was a chance for a new nebula to establish a solid position and an opportunity to properly warn the big nebulae. Kim Dokja read and read Ways of Survival. I changed the original novel, and the future became uncertain. However, it was impossible for me to use anticipation plagiarism like Han Soo-young of the 1863rd round. It was possible for writers like Han Soo-young to create possible developments of the future. To such a me, the 1863rd round Han Soo-young stated, "What are you talking about? You're a reader." Reader, a person who read and appreciated the writer's words. Author, don't you think the research into the 12 gods is a bit lacking? Ares is more violent and looks down on humans more than depicted. Besides, the probability that the 12 gods can use individually. I was the one who made the story along with the writer. Heracles' fist slammed into Pluto's head, and Pluto's fist struck Heracles' chest. In the ensuing melee, the feelings I felt while reading Ways of Survival flowed through me. I think the constellations who descended to the sub-scenario are too unfavorable. I wasn't a writer. I couldn't do it like Han Soo-young. However, more than anyone else, I was aware of the loopholes in the original work, perhaps even more than the author who wrote the novel. The game ends here. The momentum around Heracles' body changed. The strength that shattered a lion's head was concentrated on both arms of the giant soldier, and Heracles' star relic, Heracles' club, was summoned. I had also prepared for the day when I would confront him. The giant story, Demon World Spring, has begun. The status of a Demon King is released. The power of a demon king mixed with electrification. On top of that, the giant story of Kim Dokja's company was placed. I exploded all the stories I had hidden. The stories I released were amplified to an enormous level due to Pluto's buff effect. Aries was greatly astonished. It was natural to be surprised. In fact, I was overdoing it. My status was still lacking to confront one of the 12 gods, but after going to the 95th scenario, I couldn't be compared to incarnations or constellations of the same grade. At the very least, I exceeded the limits of the 60th scenario. Your status is going beyond the limit of this scenario. Since the 60th scenario, the probability storm that occurred couldn't be compared to before. If I made a mistake, I might suffer a disaster where my incarnation body was destroyed. I endured the sparks with gritted teeth. The nebula Olympus has used too much extra probability on me. Therefore, the probability allowed for large-scale scenarios such as this gigantomachia was almost gone. Indeed, Aries' status didn't rise above a certain level. Stupid fool, if you do that you will die. I might die. I looked over at Aries and declared, but you will die first. I looked down at Pluto's empty right hand. The power of the giant soldier was so high that an ordinary weapon couldn't withstand the shock. At the very least, I needed a weapon comparable to Heracles' bat. In fact, I had such a weapon. It was a weapon I have been saving for a long time, just for this moment. Come, steel sword.